And as the flames climbed higher, the guests didn't scream, they applauded. Wait, let's back up. Because that man burning in the emperor's garden? In a few decades, half the empire will be praying to him. Two men are about to die in the same week, in the same city, on the orders of the same emperor. And one of them will ask for something so strange, executioners barely know how to respond to it. This is the night Rome tried to burn out a religion using two of its founders as kindling. And it's the night that somehow backfired completely. It starts with a spark nobody can trace. A fire breaks out near the Circus Maximus. By the time anyone thinks to stop it, it's too late. For 6 days, some say 9, Rome burns. Wooden shops, narrow alleys built shoulder to shoulder, decades of fire hazards waiting for exactly this moment. When it's finally over, 10 of Rome's 14 districts are gone, and the people start asking a very dangerous question. Who benefits from this? Because Nero, the emperor, wants to rebuild the city. His way, with wider streets, his own palace complex, his own visions stamped over the ashes of old Rome. The rumor spreads faster than the fire did. The emperor started it himself. Nero needs the rumor to die, so he does something that will echo for 2,000 years. He doesn't deny it. He redirects it. There's a small, strange religious group in Rome at this time. Outsiders. People who refuse to worship the emperor as a god, who meet in secret, who talk about a man who was executed decades earlier under a different emperor, and who, they insist, came back from the dead. The Romans have a name for them, borrowed from that executed man's title. Christians. Nero needs someone to blame, and a small, secretive, unpopular sect with no political protection is exactly what he's looking for. The Roman historian Tacitus, no friend to Christians himself, later writes that Nero rounded them up. First, the ones who openly admitted what they believed. Then, using names given up under pressure, an enormous number more. They weren't condemned for burning a city. They were condemned, Tacitus writes, for hatred of the human race. But arrest is the easy part. What Nero does next is designed for something else entirely. Not justice, spectacle. Picture this: an imperial garden at night, torches lit, music playing, wine being poured, and scattered through the grounds, human beings covered in animal hides, torn apart by dogs for entertainment. Others nailed to crosses along the garden paths, and others still, coated in pitch, set on fire, burning slowly, deliberately, to provide light after the sun goes down. Tacitus records that Nero opened his own gardens for this, that he walked among the crowd dressed as a charioteer, mingling with ordinary Romans while the fires lit up the night behind him. Even Tacitus, a Roman aristocrat with no particular sympathy for Christians, admits the crowd started to feel something they didn't expect: pity. Not because the victims were innocent of everything in the public's mind, but because it was obvious this wasn't justice. It was one man's appetite for cruelty dressed up as civic punishment. Somewhere in that crowd of condemned, two men are about to become the most famous victims in the empire's history, and neither of them dies the same way. Peter wasn't born into power. He spent most of his life pulling nets out of a lake, but by the time he reaches Rome, he's become something else entirely. A leader of an underground movement the empire can't quite understand and definitely can't control. Roman law doesn't crucify citizens. Peter isn't one. So crucifixion, the punishment reserved for slaves, rebels, and foreigners, is what's waiting for him. And here's where the story takes its strangest turn. According to later Christian tradition, recorded by writers like Origen and Eusebius generations after the fact, Peter makes a request before he dies. He asks to be crucified upside down. not out of theatrics, because, the tradition says, he didn't consider himself worthy to die in the exact same position as the man he followed. Here's the part most retellings skip. Historians aren't actually sure this detail is true, and the reason why says a lot about how legends are born. The earliest writers to mention Peter's death, Clement of Rome, writing within decades of the event, confirm only this: Peter died a martyr in Rome under Nero. No crucifixion position is mentioned, no upside-down detail. That detail doesn't appear anywhere until over a century later in an apocryphal text called the Acts of Peter, a document full of legendary, almost fantastical material. Some historians point out something uncomfortable. Roman executioners weren't exactly known for taking requests from condemned prisoners. So why does the detail exist at all? Because in the text, it's not really about humility. It's a symbol. The world, the writer argues, has been turned upside down by sin, and Peter, hanging with his head toward the earth, can finally see that upside-down world for what it is. True event, or a powerful piece of theology dressed up as history? Nobody alive today can say for certain. But the symbol outlived the argument. It's why an inverted cross still bears Peter's name 2,000 years later. Peter wasn't the only apostle in that garden, and the man standing beside him in tradition got a very different ending. Paul's story runs differently from the start. Unlike Peter, Paul was born a Roman citizen, and Roman citizenship, even for a condemned man, came with one final privilege. Citizens weren't crucified, they were beheaded. It's a small mercy compared to what Peter and so many others endured, quick by the standards of Roman execution. But the early church didn't read it as mercy. They read it as confirmation. Even in death, Paul kept the legal status he'd used his entire ministry to argue from. A Roman citizen, executed by Roman law, for a faith Rome was trying to erase by force. Early writers like Dionysius of Corinth claimed both men were killed at the same time, planting the same faith in the same city with their final breath. And here's the detail almost nobody mentions when they tell this story. The emperor who ordered all of this didn't win. Nero doesn't get to enjoy his rebuilt city for long. Within 4 years, the Senate turns against him, the legions abandon him, and Nero, the man who once lit his garden with burning bodies, dies by his own hand, alone, hunted by the empire he once ruled. The faith he tried to burn out of existence in one bloody night didn't disappear. It spread. Within 3 centuries, the religion of 2 executed fishermen turned preachers became the official faith of the very empire that killed them. Today, beneath the altar of St. Peter's Basilica, built, tradition says, directly over the site of his execution, pilgrims walk over what was once the floor of Nero's private garden of horrors. The man who tried to erase 2 names ended up building, without meaning to, the most visited monument to them on earth.
Every June 29th, the Christian world marks the feast of Saints Peter and Paul, not just as a religious holiday, but as the anniversary of the night when an empire tried to silence 2 men with fire, iron, and wood, and failed completely. What do you think? Symbol or genuine memory? Drop your theory in the comments.